Bob Tressel. Tressel?
T-R-E-S-S-E-L.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Tressel.
Good morning.
Can you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
Sure. My name is Robert Tressel. Last name is spelled T-R-E-S-S-E-L. I go by Robert or Bob.
And how are you currently employed?
I'm employed as a trial consultant through my company called Forensic Investigative Services on crime scene analysis.
And how long have you owned your own company?
I started the company in 2002. Ended up full-time when I retired from law enforcement.
So prior to having your own company, you had law enforcement experience?
Yes.
And can you go into your law enforcement experience?
Yeah, I went to work for the Cobb at COBB, County Police Department in Marietta, Georgia in 1973 as a uniformed patrol officer. I received my post-police officer's training certificate in October of 1973. I was with the police department as a patrol officer until February of 1975, at which time I was promoted to the detective rank and I was transferred to the Crimes Against Persons Unit, commonly referred to as the Robbery Homicide Division.
Do you have any other work or specialized training in any type of law enforcement capacity?
I have several different things, yes. I stayed with the police department. I made the rank of sergeant in 1978. I left and went to the Cobb County Medical Examiner's Office, where I received advanced training in death investigations. When I took early retirement from Cobb County in 1997, I went to work for a company called Burton and Associates. Burton and Associates is a private company that handled primarily death investigations involving product liabilities. We also did homicide investigations for defense attorneys. And then in April of 2011, I returned to Cobb County as the chief investigator for the Cobb County District Attorney's Office.
How many hours in training in death investigations would you say you had?
I always estimated it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 to 800 hours of training between my time at the police department and my time at the medical examiner's office.
Okay. Were you ever an instructor in any type of law enforcement capacity?
I did. I was an instructor to the local police academies in death investigations, criminal investigations, crime scene analysis, and crime scene processing.
As the owner of Forensic Investigative, what do you do as a forensic investigator, consultant?
I provide consulting services to primarily defense attorneys now, in analyzing homicide investigations. It depends on what the issue is in looking at it. Is it a crime scene issue? Is it an investigative issue? Evidence collection issue? Or some expertise that I may give in blood spatter analysis, firearms information, particularly in I can't even talk, trajectory analysis, those type of things, and analyzing a crime scene.
Do you have further training in blood spatter analysis?
I do. I've received 2 advanced courses in blood spatter and blood stain evidence.
And you mentioned you primarily offer services to defense attorneys. Do you only offer your services to defense?
No, I do get contacted on occasion from prosecutors pertaining to primarily cases that I may be familiar with that are what I always call carryover cases, cases that I actually physically worked on while I was in the employment of Cobb County.
What types of cases are you normally hired to consult on?
I'd have to say the majority of the cases that I get are homicide investigations.
What goes into a homicide investigation?
Well, you got many aspects of a homicide investigation. We call it putting the pieces of the puzzle together. You've got your crime scene, and that's your initial call. Maintaining the crime scene, analyzing it, documenting what you find, then the collection of whatever the evidence you have. The next thing, and I always have to say that it depends on jurisdictions, because some agencies are much better equipped to handle a homicide investigation than other agencies. So you look at the interviews that are taken, the witnesses' statements, you try to analyze those, and in a homicide investigation, you have to corroborate, or in any criminal investigation, you have to corroborate what the witness is telling you. Can we verify that they were even there, so to speak? Can we corroborate what they say they saw? And that's part of the investigative technique. Then you get the medical examiner. You have to take the information received from the medical examiner and relate it to the crime scene. What injuries are we looking at? What type of injuries? How could they possibly have occurred? And then you go back and correlate that to the evidence you found at the crime scene. And then you got some more here.
Keep going.
And then you have your laboratory reports. The information comes from the laboratory on firearms, blood stain analysis, DNA analysis. You have to combine all of that and put it together and get an idea of what it tells you about the crime scene and how things could or did happen, if you can improve procedurally what steps took place.
So you say you mainly work with homicide investigations, but it seems like it's much broader than that.
It's much broader. You have to take in the whole investigation when you look at a case.
And what type of educational background do you have to help with that?
Well, I only have 2 years of junior college, never got a degree. It was in the early 70s. I have multiple trainings. I've been trained in homicide investigations, various schools, University of Georgia, schools put on by the FBI. I have training in what's called medical legal death investigation. It's just an upload or an upgraded investigation of death investigation. And I've had two excellent classes on that, one at the University of St. Louis School of Medicine and one at the University of Miami School of Medicine. Both were 2-week schools pertaining to medical legal aspects of death investigation, how to recognize different types of death. That's part of what the medical examiner's office does. We just don't work homicides. We have all the other sundry deaths that occur within your jurisdiction that you have to investigate, determine how they happen. I've been trained in blood spatter analysis. As I said, I've had multiple courses, and 2 of them were, one was in St. Petersburg, Florida. That was the first one I attended, and the second one was in Santa Rosa, California.
And have you received any certificates after you've completed these trainings?
I've got certificates somewhere on all of them, but yes.
Have you ever been qualified as an expert in either a criminal or a civil case?
I have.
How many times?
I would estimate well over 200. I've testified in 13 states and in the federal courts as an expert in homicide investigation, crime scene analysis.
And you said the areas you've been qualified in is homicide investigation, crime scene analysis?
Primarily, yes. It deals with blood spatter interpretation in particular cases, firearms in some aspects. I'm not a ballistician. I don't look at bullets and shell casings and tell you whether they were fired by the same weapon or a particular weapon, but I look at the analysis of that information, and I'm trained through ATF in firearms investigations, just looking at the weapons and learning how they function.
Your Honor, I tender the witness as an expert.
I don't think you need to under the rules anymore, but there you go.
Force a habit. Have you ever been, I know we talked about this a little bit, have you ever been retained or, how many times have you been retained to consult, testify in a homicide case?
Okay, start that at the beginning again.
How many times have you been retained to consult or testify on a homicide case?
Oh, good gracious. In private consulting, at least 200 times, if not more.
And how many of those have been death penalty cases?
I'm having to think of the number because I do a lot of death penalty appeal cases, probably 75 plus.
When you are retained as a consultant, what do you set out to do?
Well, the first step is to set out, what does the crime scene tell us? What is the information we can glean from the crime scene? Then it depends on what the aspects of the appellate issue is, on what my function is within looking at a case. Is it looking at to verify trajectory analysis, or is it to cause of death? Because I do get asked that quite a bit. Or is it to look at the corroborating of witnesses' statements?
And how do you accomplish those goals?
Well, first thing you have to do is understand the crime scene. You have to do an analysis of the crime scene. And then you have to look at the statements that have been given as to either eyewitness statements or investigative interviews on how the crime may have occurred. And then you have to take those statements and corroborate what the statement is telling you happened. Again, positioning, what took place on the crime scene, where certain pieces of evidence may or may not have been placed or put or found. So you have to, in dealing with witnesses, it's corroborating what they are telling you, and that's my biggest job that I'm always asked to do, is try to corroborate the statements as to what the crime scene is telling me.
Okay. And when did you become involved in the present case?
If I remember right, sometime in 2024.
And how did you become involved?
Well, it was first by a phone call and then a follow-up with some materials from your office.
Okay. And what were you asked to do?
I was asked to review the crime scene, determine what the crime scene told us as to what happened, and then to look at the testimony of Curtis Wright to see in his testimony if certain items in the testimony could be corroborated. The chain of events, where they were, the different things that he said in his testimony.
And what materials were you given in order to?
Well, I had the Lee County Sheriff's Office reports, their offense report, and then their investigative report. I had included in that would be the crime scene report by Kimberly Van Was. I had the autopsy report of Teresa Sievers. Then had the sworn statements of Curtis Wright. There were two of them that were sworn statements. And I had the trial testimony of Curtis Wright. And I also had all the crime scene photographs.
You've mentioned this morning your kind of main goal is to find corroboration.
Yes.
Were you able to find any corroboration in this case in your evaluation?
Yeah, there's some corroboration of what Curtis Wright was testifying to about the crime scene.
You mentioned there's some corroboration.
Yeah,
is it
there's
fair to say there is not some corroboration?
There's some things that I have questions about that I can't corroborate.
And what are those things?
Well, gosh, I have to kind of think in order.
We could start with the initial attack, I guess, for lack of a better word, if that helps you.
Well, the one thing is, I can tell you that the initial attack, if you have the photographs and you look at it from the garage into the kitchen area, there's dropping of blood over on the right-hand side, in the garage side of that countertop. And there's large drops of blood that are in that general area. And that's where the first blow was probably struck. Then there's the area to the left of that where Miss Sievers was down on the ground. I believe at some point in time she was either on her knees or on all fours, so to speak. And that's where she received the majority of the blows to the back of her head.
Is there anything about that initial evaluation that you just mentioned that you were not able to find corroboration for?
The only thing is the large blood drops, although photographed, were not measured.
And why is that important?
Well, it would tell us how high the blood drops came from. Blood reaches a terminal velocity at 6 feet. In other words, it will not gain any more speed if it's dropped from a higher height. And a single drop of blood is very distinct, and these are single drops of blood that have hit the floor. Without measuring them, it's impossible to determine the exact height they came from.
So is it fair to say that if we knew the size of that blood drop, we might be able to know what person that blood came from?
Well, we know that
The height of the person
we would
that
know
it
the
came from?
height that it came from. Then the question is, what did it come from, the person, or did it come from the weapon that was used? So it's interesting, so it can be dripping blood that comes off the weapon. When she's on the ground over to the left, between her upper legs, her thigh areas of her legs, there's droplets of blood. Again, were not measured, but that's dropping blood that is single drops of blood, which is pretty much indicative of coming off of the weapon used.
Okay. Since we've mentioned blood, what is blood spatter?
Blood spatter is, well, it's a multitude of things. It's blood that has been shed or dropped. There's different types. You have blood droplets, like we talked about, just round droplets. Then you have what we call projected blood, and that's blood that is slung off. You can sling it off with your hand or a bloody object. So that becomes projected blood, what we call low-speed spatter. Then you have impact spatter, which is where blood flow has already been created, and then you have an impact directly in the same general area, and we now are spattering that blood, projecting that blood at a higher speed, and it gets very small and tiny, and it's indicative in this crime scene along the refrigerator and the cabinetry just above her head. There is impact spatter there. And then you can have high-speed spatter, which is from a gunshot wound. And then you have cast-off spatter. And a cast-off is where his weapon is used, and as it's pulled up, it'll cast off on a wall or a ceiling. And when it's brought down, it'll cast off again if it has significant amounts of blood on it. So that's what we're looking for, is what do we see?
And what value does that provide?
Well, it gives you an idea where the victim was. It's especially useful when the body's been removed to try to determine where the body was and where the victim was lying. We can come back and do our angles. We can actually measure blood spatter to determine approximately what angle it struck a wall at. So we can tell you, well, it came from this particular height.
Okay. Going back to our conversation about corroboration, were there any other items or pieces of the crime scene that you did not find corroboration for?
Well, there were a couple of things. One was the damage done to the side garage door, the pry marks. The pry marks were primarily at the actual door lock, but there's no pry marks at the deadbolt.
What does that tell you?
Well, the deadbolt had to be open. There's no, if they were trying to show that you were getting in, there should be pry marks at the deadbolt. And deadbolts are exceptionally hard to open with a pry bar, unless you break actually the framing. So there was a comment in Curtis's statement that he used a pry bar to do that damage. When asked in his first interview, where did you get the pry bar or crowbar? He used the word crowbar. He said he got it in the garage. There was never a question asked that I could see where in the garage you got it. What'd you do with it? And he said, I put it back where I got it. And that, I can't corroborate what is he talking about. I do know that a smaller pry bar was found in the saddlebag of the motorcycle, but that was never attempted to be matched up to the pry marks on the door. Okay. And then at a later date, they found a crowbar in a yard several houses away, and that was never tried to be matched to the door. So I can't corroborate that a pry bar was used. I can't corroborate where he got it from, because he can't tell me, he was never asked that,
Okay.
that I can see.
Are there any other things that stick out to you as far as lack of corroboration?
Well, he talks about that he got the hammer that was sitting on the freezer, the chest freezer, that was sitting there. And we, based on the crime scene photographs, it's the hammer that's found in the garage that's covered in blood. All right. In his statement, he says that Jimmy Rogers had a ball-peen hammer. And a ball-peen hammer does not have a claw. And he said that the last blow struck to Miss Sievers was Jimmy Rogers using the claw end of the hammer.
Do you recall seeing any indication that a claw hammer was used?
Not on Miss Sievers. There's not a documented claw hammer injury to her.
How would you be able to tell if there was a mark from a claw hammer?
Well, the claw has got like two fingers coming down, and it's rather sharp. It's used to pull nails out, essentially. When it's wielded, it actually will leave two distinct marks, and depending on when it was used during the course of a fight, it'll dig into the skull. And a lot of times when it's pulled back out, it'll rip the tissue. And she doesn't have any injuries consistent with the claw hammer based on the autopsy report.
In your review of the crime scene, are you able to tell if one or two hammers were used?
You can't tell. These injuries are all described as having crescent shape, which is typical of a regular hammer, because it doesn't hit exactly flat. It hits at an angle and creates crescent-shaped wounds. I lost my train of thought
okay.
right there.
That's okay. We could come back to that. Would the person who was attacking Dr. Sievers, would they have any indications on them of the attack?
They should. Whoever was doing the wielding of the hammer that was doing the damage to Miss Sievers, he should have blood on the front of his clothing, probably.
And why would they have blood on the front of their clothing?
That's from the impact spatter, from the multiple blows. If I remember the autopsy report, there's 17 blows to the head.
And were you able to review the crime scene in relation to any testimony of Mr. Wright?
No.
Were you given any statements from Mr. Wright?
I'm sorry, my brain went wrong. Mr. Wright, yeah, I was able to correlate what he was saying about the crime scene to what we see at the crime scene.
Were there any statements that stuck out at you as possibly being inconsistent with the crime scene?
Yeah, one of the things that was inconsistent was he stated that she entered into the garage and went into the house after taking the luggage out of the car. That's all consistent with what the crime scene tells us. And he said that she walked in and she either put the pocketbook on the countertop or put it somewhere there. Well, when looking at crime scene photographs, the pocketbook is in a chair that's on the opposite side of the counter area where she would have come to and where she was attacked at.
Why is that of significance to you?
Well, she's a very tiny person. She would have had to reach all the way across the countertop and place the pocketbook in the chair before a blow was struck. I don't know whether the pocketbook was moved, but we do know that there were a couple of items removed from apparently the pocketbook and ended up on the floor to the right of where she's found. And there's the items, I think it's a driver's license, a little billfold type thing. It is sitting on top of blood. So that had to be removed and placed on the floor after the bloodshed occurred.
And what would that indicate to you?
Somebody trying to manipulate the scene.
When you're hired to consult on a case at a trial level, is it your practice or is it common to assist trial counsel to prepare cross-examinations of witnesses?
Yes, I assist with that depending on statements and interviews, and especially when we have, when from an investigative standpoint I have questions that haven't been answered or haven't been asked. Then I recommend, we try to get to the bottom of this at some point in time. So I would recommend certain things be asked of witnesses to kind of hone in on exactly what they're trying to tell us.
Is that something that could have been that you could have done in this case?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I would have talked about. Number one is the measuring of the blood droplets. Depending on the time that an attorney gets involved with the case, whether we can still do any work with it. The other thing would be trying to pinpoint some questions toward more towards the ball-peen hammer. What happened to it? Then the other thing would have been looking at why use the claw hammer when they were supposed to be committing this murder. And then there was in a statement about that Mr. Wright gave about a traumatic brain injury. And I read through the entire file, and no one ever checked to find out if that's true or not.
Why is that of importance to you?
Well, if you suffered from a traumatic brain injury, it affects you in different ways in different people. It's what is the nature of the traumatic brain injury? How did it occur? When did it occur? What symptoms was he suffering from to qualify having a traumatic brain injury? And he was never questioned about when they occurred. It was, the only thing I could find, it was supposedly related to 2 motor vehicle accidents. And he said that the first accident is where he got his TBI. And that he did tell the detective that it does cause aggression on his part. And that's the extent of knowing anything about his TBI injury.
Okay, one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tressel, just going back, you also mentioned some things were corroborated with the crime scene. There was corroboration.
Yeah.
What were those things?
Well, corroboration, based on his testimony, was he couldn't remember where the motorcycle was, but he remembers that when the garage door opened, he ducked down behind these blue storage containers. Well, there's blue storage containers in the garage, so you corroborate that part of the statement. Now, my comment is, did he actually hide there, or did he just duck down there, or could he have been somewhere else in the residence? Definitely, whatever assailant initially made the contact, he testified that he followed her in after she was in the kitchen, and that he struck the first blow. But he couldn't remember whether he struck her from the front or the back. And by that I mean, what was she facing away from him or facing him? She couldn't remember. He couldn't remember, rather.
Is there anything from the crime scene that gives us that answer?
Well, there is a blow to the front of the head that is different from the other blows, and it's kind of a V-shaped laceration. It's not the crescent shape like the head of the peen of the hammer hitting her, and it's an unusual wound. I do not think, and I didn't find any evidence at the crime scene, the documentation or the photographs, that it would be consistent with her falling to the ground and creating the injury. So when I think about it, the best way, in looking at the injury pattern, it looks like the hammer has been turned sideways, where I'm not hitting on the peen or not hitting on the claw, I'm hitting on the side of the hammer, which could cause a V-shaped laceration like she has. Now, the interesting part of that injury is it goes all the way through the tissue down to the scalp, but it didn't fracture the skull.
Why is that interesting?
It's not a full-blown blow like the blows to the back of her head where the skull is completely fractured and shattered.
Is there any other information you found corroborated?
Oh, gotta think. Well, the hammer could have been on the chest freezer. Okay, it's not there, it's on the floor, but he said it was on the chest freezer. Okay, I can take that as, okay, I can corroborate that it could be on the chest freezer. The fact that the suitcases that were left at the doorstep have been opened up and material pulled out. Curtis said that he pulled some of the clothing out and scattered it a little bit. Well, that's corroborating what we see on the crime scene. So there are periods of corroboration. Some of the things that he said, and those are the big ones that come out. He said he was looking at the motorcycle. Well, there is a motorcycle in the garage, kind of parked between the two parkings. So I know that he was in the garage at or about the time, somewhere around the time that this incident occurred.
Okay. Was everything that you've testified today available? Was all that information available at the time of trial?
I'm sure it was, yes. I don't think anything new has come forward.
I'll pass the witness.
State.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You were retained in this case to specifically compare the crime scene against Curtis Wright's testimony and statements. Is that correct?
Yes,
You were asked to see if there were any inconsistencies,
yes,
but you actually did find that there were some consistencies, correlations.
I
Is
did,
that correct?
yes.
Okay. You reviewed Mr. Wright's trial testimony and from Mr. Sievers' case, right?
I did, yes.
But you did not review any other trial testimony from his case, did you?
No,
And you weren't asked to look at how Mr. Sievers' attorneys performed during the trial in any way,
no,
or what they did with the information that they had, how they presented it during the trial.
you're correct. No, I was not.
So other than the questions asked of Mr. Wright during Mr. Sievers' trial, you don't know whether his attorneys attempted to expose any potential inconsistencies about Wright's statements.
I do know that during cross-examination at the trial level, they did try to point out some inconsistencies.
Sure. So they tried to, during Wright's testimony, his attorneys tried to point out some inconsistencies, right?
Yes,
But beyond that, because you didn't look at any other witness's testimony, you don't know if the attorneys attempted to point out any inconsistencies through other witnesses.
no, I do not.
Okay. And you talked about the information that you reviewed in this case. I'd like to go over a few things that you didn't review.
Okay,
You never reviewed Mark Sievers' phone records, right?
no,
You never reviewed Curtis Wright's phone records?
no,
You never reviewed the trial testimony about the digital forensics in this case?
no, I did not.
And you didn't look at the testimony from the crime scene technicians during trial?
No, I didn't.
You didn't hear any testimony about how Mark Sievers acted after the murder occurred?
No,
You weren't asked to review evidence in this case beyond the actual crime scene to determine whether the evidence was consistent with Mr. Wright's testimony. Is that correct?
okay, I missed the very
Okay,
first part of that.
Beyond the crime scene, you weren't asked to look at evidence to determine whether it was consistent with Mr. Wright's testimony.
If we're talking about the evidence was collected away from the crime scene,
Right.
no, I was not asked to look at that.
Okay, so your only focus was the crime scene itself.
That's correct.
And you were comparing the crime scene with or against Mr. Wright's testimony.
With what he was saying about the crime scene, yes.
You mentioned that measuring blood droplets could determine the potential height of the person.
Not the person, how high the blood came from.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to get at. So if the blood was a dropping from a hammer, it would only tell you the height from the hammer that it dropped, not necessarily the person's height who is holding the hammer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So just to clarify, it would not actually tell you the suspect's height. It would just tell you the height that the blood dropped from with a victim, or I'm sorry. It wouldn't tell you the suspect's height. Is that correct?
No, the only thing you could glean from it is sometimes when you got a large variance in heights of individuals, the drop of blood, I believe in looking at it just with without measuring device, would be difficult to be a dropped blood from Mrs. Seaver because she's so short. It had to come from a higher height. So the only thing you can determine is if this thing is over 6 feet. In other words, it leaves me a drop that's 6 feet in height. That means it could have fallen from a height even higher, which would be wielded by a taller person.
Okay.
So that excuse me. So that's why we look at what is the height, and then can we compare it with what we know about the crime scene as to where and how it would have come from.
Okay, but you didn't make those determinations in this case?
I couldn't.
Okay. And you mentioned that there was no documented injuries that would have come from a claw-shaped hammer.
Not based on the photographs and the autopsy report.
Okay. And other than your review of the trial testimony from Curtis Wright, you didn't know how that either came out during trial or didn't come out during trial. Is that correct?
I did not read the medical examiner's testimony, so no.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Defense.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Is this witness to be released or retained?
You're released.
State your grace.
No objection.
You're free to go. Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Jennifer Wood.